I mean, we all have different words for what the main problem is. The main problem, I think, still is that too many of us don't understand that we can make decisions, but those in power haven't understood that we can make a decision to destroy or decisions to enable. And I think that's just an observation that comes from working quite regularly in context where people are able to make decisions. And there's so much within a pattern of perpetuating like destructive systems that they lost the ability to know that we can take other decisions. And whenever there's a suggestion to make other decisions, like from a feminist or decolonial position, then the argument is, oh no, we can't change things because that's how it is. But I think if you're for the main problem, that really is the main problem, that too many have forgotten that we can make decisions. Well, I think to insist on the fact that it's a choice. I mean, I think that's what a lot of feminist theory and suggestions do, to say, look, we can practice differently. And that's what a lot of people around me do, to insist that you can use your means to either perpetuate racism, exploitation, patriarchy, or you can use your means to practice differently. So that's, of course, not a solution at all, but I think that's the first step, to insist that there's a choice in a different way. But yeah, I think to keep working on those two levels of practicing differently, which is often small scale and slow, it takes a lot of time and attention, but within the bigger argument, insist that we want a different politics. But yeah, to both practice and use the experience of practice to insist that systemic change is possible. Because the system is so strong that we almost forget that other decisions are possible. You know, art is a niche. So I think I do what we all do, that we aim to practice the values we believe in, that we network. I mean, that's something I really learned from you and from the first Urban Act book, that if we keep connecting, if we keep building communities of practice, if we keep insisting that this is not a single attempt, but actually quite a widespread motivation, we can scale it up to a degree. And I think we all also try to influence policy wherever we are on the levels we have access to. So you are in solidarity with colleagues and others who have similar values, and you try to influence policy where you have access, either to systems or through language or through skills. But as an artist, I think I'm not different to anyone else in that sense. I think with my inherited position of being able to proclaim and use autonomy within art, this creative, artistic, cultural autonomy that artists are so given within the European tradition, this should be spread. This should not be a privilege for the arts, but it should be a basic human conditions for everyone. But I quite like this term cultural democracy. So I don't like to be singled out as an artist, because I think art is just one very particular form of cultural production, but it has certain freedoms or privileges that other professions have lost. So that's why it's important to reflect on artistic autonomy, but not to protect it, but to share it. So if I go back to this idea of artistic autonomy, so let's say with CompanyDrinks, it was joyful to proclaim that I will practice as an artist, but I'm at the same time setting up a local drinks company. And you don't have to argue this too much, because you can self-proclaim your position and you can self-proclaim your project. My main interest is to create social space, common space in where we have an understanding of each other and our shared resources, and actually doing things together outside of more restrained concepts like a business or the family or the community. So CompanyDrinks was set up, and it has very, very much changed in its 10 years. But it was set up around the idea of we're making drinks together, and the whole production cycle, like in a usual company, would be streamlined. It would be taken away from the public. But within CompanyDrinks, the whole production cycle of growing, harvesting, making, enjoying, trading, reinvesting, each step in this production cycle was made public. And through this kind of continuous seasonal public cycle, you slowly create a new social and public realm where people meet on the basis of their own interest, but they also meet in order to make and share something together. So you could just join because you want to go picking or you want a free drink. But over the years, your position within the project might change from just being a visitor to becoming part of the collective and to becoming more involved in political work in the borough. So some have, others haven't. It's a very basic idea of commons, that you actually become aware of what you have access to as a relatively loose group. We've worked with groups quite directly around food policies, politicizing, and it's been rejected to a degree because people don't necessarily identify with that language that seems strange or seems unfamiliar to them. We work with a less politicized language, but try to communicate more on council level what changes we want. But maybe I give it an example. Cam Jarvis, who's been in CompanyDrinks as long as I have, she's just published a food report for the council, and she's really done it in a super impressive way along our values, like not to impose language, not to impose demands, but to very collaboratively and collectively research, have a community-led research that led to like 12 very concrete political demands to the council. It's how we phrase it and how as a group they could bring it forward so everybody could identify with it. So the report was both a kind of bottom-up articulation of demands and a kind of more experience translating it into policy suggestions. I think so far the most difficult moment was when we had to realize that we perpetuated racism to a degree, like literally organizationally. But yeah, we overcame this by actively issuing an anti-racism policy, by actively producing a toolkit, by actively rewriting all our policies, by very actively producing and discussing our code of conduct, and by very actively caring about the safeguarding of the space. That we still exist, like quite literally. I think 2 out of 5 businesses in London go bankrupt after the first 2 years. So of course the victory is that by being aware of our economy being a very diverse, we've built up a resilience that allows us to be relatively certain that we will exist, because we know that we don't just rely on financial income, but we also rely on all those other contributions which we are aware of. So that's a victory, a certain resilience. If we distinguish between those who are paid part-time team, the key holders and visitors, like if we have those 3 groups in mind, I think from the paid part-time team, it's an appreciation that you actually can work on something you like and you get paid for it. You know, it's like meaningful paid work where you feel that you have a certain autonomy. For everybody else, and again, I'm quite careful here, who's coming back, there's an appreciation of the safeguarding of the space that's been established by now, or there's an acknowledgement of that a certain culture and values are lived, and it is non-discriminatory, and there's processes if something would happen. It's a bit cheesy, but it is this idea of good company. So it's a very valuable social space where we care and always cook and have food. That's important, you know, like a culture of hosting and safeguarding. All the key holder groups just acknowledge the fact that they can use the building for free for their own programs. It's a place where you can actually live and practice your values. It's very simple, but also quite rare. I mean, a lot of dissemination is relationship building, has to be said. I think, like locally, the amount of time and care that goes into talking and listening and adapting is immense. But I think other than that, printed matter helps. I think language is actually really quite powerful here to carefully change the language. And I mean, I think, you know, that's what I've really learned from like Kathrin Böhm, that you don't have to be anti, you propose your very own affirmative language that still can incorporate all your values, but it's pointing towards something rather than rejecting something. You know, we started this, the interdependence, which hasn't grown, but the basic idea was that many of us do similar things. How do we make this visible together to feel stronger, but also to feel that there's a scale to it? But a book where projects can see each other in neighborhood or in this idea of interdependence, that's very useful. From what position am I responding to those questions? As someone who's the initiator, clearly, yeah, the founder, but as someone